a story. 15 years ago, I first got promoted as a manager at SAP. I was living at that time in Germany. Yes, I'm German. I know nothing says that about me, but I am. And I was leading a team of, I think it was around 10 German men. And we sold a big supply chain project to a company in Germany. And I entered the room with my team as the manager, and there was a table full of men, C-level, supply chain expert, I think even the CHRO was there. And then I entered, said good morning, and one of the gentlemen in the company asked me to serve the coffee for everyone, which obviously I agreed because it's a skill that I excel at. So I served 15 coffees. And then the guy told me, thank you very much, and he showed me the door. And I said, sorry, I'm gonna call him Herr Müller. I cannot leave because if you want a return on your investment, it's me who's gonna lead your project. I'm the boss. And then we started the conversation. So I am happy that this is not happening at this stage anymore. And as supply chain is changing and evolving, one of the greatest things about this evolution is that we have more women in supply chain. And we are changing the conversation. We're bringing different leadership styles, and we're bringing different perspectives. And this is what this panel is about. And with that, I'm going to introduce to my fellow panelists. And I'm going to start with Jennifer Jacks from Schneider Electric. Welcome. You can sit here, please. I'm going to go to Katie Holman from General Mills. And Lisa Rauzzi, Executive Director Supply Chain from one side. Welcome. Megan Fisher, COO Sundays. And Jennifer Kelly, Vice President GCS North America, Schneider Electric as well. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cristina Ricaurte. I'm the Regional Vice President for Supply Chain Solutions for the Americas at SAP. I was in the first panel. This is my second panel today. Super excited. I think this is real energy that we're going to bring here. So this is how it's going to go. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and your company. And then we're going to start with the questions, and we kick off the conversation. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds great.
Okay, so you go first, please.
Great, thanks. So my name is Jennifer Jacks. I work at Schneider Electric. I've been with Schneider for almost 20 years now. We only hire Jennifers in Schneider. I've been with Schneider for 20 years. We're an energy management company. We help people make the most of their energy. We don't produce elevators. We don't make meat products. It's really a technology company. We have an industrial portfolio of products that help companies industrialize, digitalize, and electrify. And then we have a software portfolio that creates an end-to-end energy management solution. Right now, I'm leading the cluster of manufacturing plants in North America that produce all of our electronics products. So great to be here.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Hi, my name is Katie Holman. I work at General Mills. I've been there almost 15 years. I lead our meals and baking supply chain. And so General Mills is a global food company. We talk about how we make the food that the world loves. And it's everything from human food to pet food. In meals and baking, it's things like Betty Crocker brownies and cake mixes, Old El Paso taco shells, Progresso soup, and lots of Pillsbury biscuits, which they are all ramping up right now. Pies, cookies, all the things for the holidays. And really excited to be here with all these other amazing women.
I'm a very big customer of yours.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Please.
Hi, I'm Lisa Rousey. I'm the Executive Director of Supply Chain and Customer Experience at One Size Beauty. We are an influencer, founder-led brand by our iconic makeup artist, Patrick Starr. We are backed by Luxury Brand Partners, which is also a very iconic incubator that's funded many projects in the past. Our claim to fame right now is that we are making the #1 makeup product in North America for the past year. So we're extremely proud of that as a group. We're an extremely lean organization, and I have a very mighty team that I'm very proud of. So,
Thank you.
I'm Megan Fisher. I'm the COO at Sundays. We are a D2C furniture brand. We actually just launched a new brand called Hedda, sister brand, last week. It's a project that's been gestating for a year. Been keeping secrets, is out in the open now. So we have 2 brands. And I oversee all of our supply chain, so customer service, warehousing, logistics, and then sort of strategy and business ops. Yeah.
All right. I'm Jen Kelly. I've been with Schneider Electric for almost 5 years. Prior to my role leading logistics for North America, I also led our supply chain planning organization for about 4 years as well. Jen explained it really nicely about Schneider Electric, but one thing I'll just say is that it's a lot of places you don't see, right? So when you think about all of the power for this hotel, for hospitals, for data centers, bringing you the internet, right? Schneider Electric is behind it. If you go home, look at your load centers, look at your panels, your breakers. If it says Square D, that's Schneider Electric. So we're hidden in a lot of places that keep you going day in and day out.
I'm gonna look when I get home now.
Thank you. So typically in a panel, we direct the questions to people, but this, I think I want you all to answer. What drew you first to this career in supply chain, and what is it that you love about this the most?
So Jen and I were actually talking about this earlier today, how both of us had kind of, quote, fallen into supply chain. And I feel like, at least at the time that I came into supply chain, it wasn't really, you know, a kind of a function that everybody talked about. It wasn't a career that people necessarily pursued. You know, I started my career in biotechnology, and, you know, I just started to notice some inefficiencies. I think I was kind of, you know, hardwired to see problems and inefficiencies in the organization. And through a kind of lunch conversation with our controller, I happened to make a comment about wanting to save us money, and that was it. Pretty quickly, they put me into procurement, and it was kind of no end after that. So I love supply chain for me because I think, like I said, I'm innately like a problem solver. I like fixing problems. It's a very target-rich environment in the supply chain. You know, it's never boring. It's always changing. So that's the piece that I like the most. It keeps me in the field.
I love it. There's some similarities there for me too. I started my career actually in manufacturing, and for me, it was like this perfect blend of solving technical problems and working with people. And I actually thought I would spend my whole career just in manufacturing because I loved it so much. And General Mills, gosh, probably about 10 years ago now, wanted to start this journey to create these end-to-end supply chain leaders. And I had the opportunity to go and lead a team that kind of spanned the whole operation. And it was like this whole world opened up to me that I didn't know existed beyond the walls of manufacturing. And I've loved it ever since, because I think one of our big roles in supply chain is to solve these really big challenges that are always coming our way. And you get so many different levers to pull in supply chain. You're definitely on your toes all the time. It's fun.
For sure.
I have a similar experience as well. I'm very solutions driven. I always had been. I found it very valuable to work in an industry, in the beauty industry, and previously in apparel, where I found that I can also marry my creative passions with solutions, driving solutions for the organizations. I found quickly that my voice was respected, appreciated, and my opinions mattered in the rooms that I was sitting in. So I've always appreciated that, and I'm very valued for what I bring to the table there.
Yeah, similar story. I have a very short tenure in supply chain. I'm more of a fashion apparel background, more on the product development, planning, buying, merchandising side. And so I got into supply chain when I joined my current company 2.5 years ago. They were like, you're going to own logistics and warehousing, customer care. I'm like, cool. But the thing that I've had sort of throughout my career, and it's sort of been innate to me, is that, again, I like solving problems. I'm super efficiency driven. The thing that I can always do is get from point A to point B in a really streamlined way. And how do we do it the fastest way, in the way that makes the most sense, saves us money, time, energy. And so I've been on a steep learning curve. But the interesting thing is that I've sort of found the common thread is, a lot of it is just simple processes. You just map it out step by step. I might not be the subject matter expert, but I can map anything. My team knows I'm like, I love putting anything in a chart. Give me a stoplight status, red, yellow, green. And it's pretty consistent. Doesn't matter where you are. So that's sort of how I fell into it. And now I'm more on the actual true supply chain side. But again, it's always driven by process efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, kind of a similar story. I would say, when I was looking at going to college, selecting my major, I knew I loved math and science, and I didn't want to be a doctor. So basically not understanding what supply chain is, I said, okay, I'll be an engineer. So out of school, I was an engineer, really enjoyed that experience, but quickly learned that I love strategy and optimization, and I love figuring out how to make money. That was a passion of mine. So had various roles after my stint in engineering, made the decision to go on the more commercial side of sales and marketing. I was coming together with this business development plans and strategies, but we never had the right product to really go out there and sell. So I started partnering with my supply chain colleagues, trying to figure out how do we invest, how do we do the business cases, how do we justify, how do we bring that product to market? And then the CEO tapped me on the shoulder and said, why don't you come join supply chain? So that's essentially how I started my career in supply chain about 10 years ago.
Yeah. So Megan, you said something really interesting, which is you said you're new to supply chain with 10 years of experience. So as leaders, and I know this question will come up later, but imagine how difficult it is to have new talent joining, trying to learn on supply chain, and then they having to talk to you guys or ladies who have been here 25 years, 30 years in the topic. But we will talk about that later on. And I have a next question, maybe. This time I'll start by you, Jennifer. And we have enough time for everybody to share their experience. This is so interesting that I want everybody to give an opinion. But now that we spoke, what are those traits that you loved about supply chain? What are the unique strengths or traits or leadership styles that women, us, bring to the supply chain roles that you feel are especially valuable in collaboration with men, obviously, and with other diverse perspectives. But I want to know, what is it that we bring to the table?
Yeah, I think for me, maybe it's personally, but I think you could obviously see this trait amongst everyone. But it's really looking at the ability to multitask, right? There's never been one day in supply chain where I've sat back and been like, this is perfect, everything's going according to plan, right? You're always trying to figure out what fire do you want to kind of tick up and fight that day, or what do you also want to acknowledge is happening around you, but say, I need to continue on this one path moving in this direction. So for me, it's really that ability to 80-20, understand what you have to immediately tackle and approach and drive resolution on, and then what do you want to look at kind of parking to the side and continuing on that bigger picture, the vision of where you're headed as an organization. So really juggling multitasking and remaining, I think, balanced in your strategy.
Yeah, and we're good at multitasking, right?
Yes.
Anyone else wants to add?
I think I would add to that, and I think it's like the uniquely female thing, and maybe for those of us who are moms, it resonates, but like, you get really efficient at doing stuff when you don't have time because you have to balance. There's just unique pressures, I think, that women and moms have, and when I became a mom, I didn't really get it, and then I did, and it's like, oh, I get it now. And so you have to have this ability at home and at work to just figure out what you're going to deal with and what you're not. And I just think that's something specifically to women and in supply chain where you have to figure out like what fire am I going to pick up or not. It helps you get really good at figuring out what you're going to do in a very time-efficient manner because you have so little of it.
Yeah.
Just one more build. This was so interesting because this just happened like last week. There was the podcast I listened to. It's called The Indicator. It's usually about economics. And this episode was called teamwork makes the dream work. And they studied these really highly effective teams, and they were trying to figure out, like, what is it that does it? And they tried all these different traits, and the one thread that they found, like the biggest indicator of a team to solve a really big challenge, was the number of women on the team. And you pause and you're like, what? What is that? And it is a generalization, but what they found was it elevated the emotional intelligence of the team. And so it led to higher communication, collaboration, building trust. And if you think about like the big things that you have to go and get done, we have these really complex challenges, we have all these stakeholders to navigate, like having that skill set isn't just valuable, like it's essential. So I thought that was just like this really interesting take and a really good parallel into supply chain too.
Yeah. No, this is very interesting. You talked about being a mother and so on. I know this is questions that no one will ask to a man. No one will say in an interview, oh, are you a dad? And what do you bring to the table? This is the questions that we need to answer, but it's a reality. When I go and interview people for my team, there's one in particular, she said, I know more about logistics than anywhere here. I have 3 kids, small children. I have to get them at some point. And I have the best negotiation skills ever. So I think it is like that.
Something there.
So we spoke about, I introduced a little bit the topic of future generations and how can we best prepare and support the next generation of women, but also men, because we still collaborate and this is still diversity, what we need in different perspective. And I'm gonna start by you this time. So how can we prepare to support the next generation, women, men? Are you adapting, I don't know, the workplace culture to better retain, grow, and excite people to come into supply chain?
Yeah, I think we are. I mean, I'm kind of similar to what you were saying. I'm pretty passionate about manufacturing. It's where I really started my supply chain career. And I like that in Schneider, at least, we're starting to build more women in that vocation, in manufacturing, where historically we haven't seen so many coming up the pipe. You know, we have a leadership development program that we started for students right out of university. So they come into supply chain and we rotate them through different functions for a year each for 3 years in 3 different plants or locations. I think it's pretty important when you're building the kind of core supply chain competencies to spend some time in the manufacturing
We were just
plants.
talking about this today, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I think it's pretty easy to want to jump to those kind of corporate level jobs when you're just out of school, but I mean, on the plant floor is really where you get that kind of early indicator of what it's really like being part of the kind of ground level, getting stuff out the door every day. So I'm a pretty big advocate for that, and it's something we're trying to build at Schneider. You too?
We are. We have a very similar called our early career development program, and we want these young graduates to get exposure in the plant first. We feel like it builds these foundational technical skills and leadership skills, because you do have to work with people from like all walks of life to get cases out the door. And so you can't trade that experience, and you don't want to rush it either. I think sometimes people are like, okay, let me get through it and then get to corporate. We're like, no, spend some time here. You get such great development and really stretched in those roles. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I feel like it's really interesting working for an indie brand. You know, our talent pipeline is much smaller than some other traditional companies that are much larger. So we're really looking to hire based on personality traits. And also, you know, in conjunction with what kind of skill set do they bring to the table? Are they going to make the right decisions when they're put into a corner? You know, we have our, any of our VPs come to them, and are they going to be able to answer them and be effective with their communication and make that right call? If I'm out of the office and, you know, my CFO is out of the office this week, are they able to hold down the fort when we have only a team of 10 people? So it's really important to just hire properly from the beginning and make sure you're really identifying key characteristics there that are going to, you know, be able to make your employees succeed. And then just overall arching, just making sure that you're guiding them through the process of navigating, you know, the politics of the smaller brands and what types of decisions that we want to make and how the organization wants to move forward. Just from a top-down perspective, I think is really important. So.
Interesting. I have a question out of curiosity. I'm out of script here. Being a beauty brand, and I'm gonna use a cliche because that's where we live. Do you get men and women to apply, so you have a good mix of diversity?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, Patrick, our founder, is male, so he brings in a really diverse, just by the inherent name of our brand, One Size, and makeup is a one size fits all. We are very inclusive, so we do get all types of people applying for the job. So it really is, you know, we might be hiring somebody in supply chain that might not have any direct supply chain experience from the past. But I always say that, you know, I feel like a supply chain role within an indie brand is actually a sales role, because you come up, you know, you have to sell your ideas, you have to sell your concepts, you have to sell and then execute on whatever you bring to the table. You know, I'm managing down, but I'm also managing up. You know, we hire subject matter experts in silos, but we also want to make sure that they can explain what they do to the entire organization. So really important.
Cool.
The only thing I would also add in terms of skill development, I do think being on the ground where the action is, whether that's in manufacturing, if it's on the plant floor, like for my teams, I'm like, you know, go hang out in the warehouse. Like, make sure you might not be a warehouse associate, but if you're working with the warehouse cross-functionally, go visit our places, meet our people, understand what the other teams do. We encourage our, you know, we have showrooms on for some of our brands, and so go hang out in the showrooms, interact with customers. But also, I think now it's sort of post-COVID, return to office. I get a lot of pushback on the number of days. We're a hybrid workplace, so 3 days in, 2 days out. And I think there's a little bit of resistance, particularly in the younger generation, to working in office, because there was a big chunk of time where they were remote. It's so important to go interact with your peers, leaders. I think getting that exposure is really important. And so I think that's another hurdle that we're seeing, where people sort of feel like it's a chore to go into the office. And I sort of grew up, I'm like, I love going to work. Like, I'm in the office 5 days a week because I want to be there. I really want to interact with my people, my teams, people who I don't, who aren't on my immediate teams. And you can get so much more done in a 10-second hallway conversation than, hey, can you hop on a Teams or a Zoom call and like schedule a meeting that's half an hour, but really only need to be 5 minutes. And I think young people might not necessarily understand the importance of that, because at the beginning of their career, they didn't have it. And so there was like an adjustment back to it, and they got used to being able to multitask at home and doing all these things. And so I think that's one where it's really important to stress and make sure you prioritize. And obviously everybody's workplaces are different, but I just think it's, for me, I think building the next generation of leaders, importance to like come to the office, interact with your peers, interact with other leaders, get exposure and learn.
Thank you. And Jennifer?
Yeah, I was going to say, kind of thinking back on my own career, but it's give accountability and responsibility very early in their careers. I think a lot of times we'll fall into the pattern of saying, okay, well, this person's very green, or they need to learn first. But I am a firm believer that you really learn by doing, and by having that accountability, that responsibility early in your career, you start to build that confidence. You learn, right? You make mistakes, but you're also not going to have such a big scope that the organization's going to fail, right? Your manager's still gonna help you kind of pick up the pieces. So for me, especially when bringing in, you know, right out of college, entry-level employees into the organization, I really try to work with their managers too, to think through, how are we going to give them the right level of responsibility, understanding the impact that their decisions have, so that they develop into the managers, the leaders that we need.
Yeah, so I think it's all about, as you said, giving opportunities. At SAP, we have the solution experts in the team, as I was mentioning. And the first thing they learn in SAP is the solution. So when they go out and they speak to you as customers, sometimes they don't know the process, they don't have the experience, they don't know the context. But if you don't give them the go and make a mistake, or go and try, and you ask customers explaining, then they will never get the chance to grow. So I think this is the most important part, just giving them a chance and knowing we were also there. We also did some mistakes. So I'm gonna switch totally the topic to technology. The panelist before us said you're gonna hear the word AI 1,000 times. So let's add to that count. And maybe I'm gonna start in the middle this time with you, Lisa. So as supply chains embrace new technology and AI, how AI is changing the way that we build competencies in supply chain and to introduce new talent into the field. So this is also another topic, right? That now AI is in the mix. So it's not only about the skills that the new talents bring, but also how we compete with some of the AI, or how do we use it to our advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the introduction of AI, we've effectively eliminated that entry-level role in our organization. So we're looking to hire talent that's going to be able to manage the AI. With that inherently comes a lot of education around, well, what do you need to do to make this project work? What do you need to do to make this software work the way you need to? It goes back to the data integrity too, of the platform of what you're looking to and the goal you're looking to achieve. So for us, I always like to integrate AI. I encourage the team to use AI into just every daily task, like even very simple things as to sending an email to make it more clear cross-functionally. How can you work on scenario planning? You can enter all of your information in here, and it could spit out 5 different potential outcomes. And then how are you going to map that out for the team to understand on a more intrinsic level? So,
Anyone wants to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is really having to think about what does your entry level role look like, because you still need them, but just you will need less of them, right? Because you don't need the person to do the data entry or gather the data or make, I think on an earlier panel, someone was saying on the logistics side, you don't need like a junior logistics person to track the shipment or whatever. For us, we do a lot of final mile delivery, so we have to figure out, like, did the customer get their delivery yet? Are they happy? Whatever. We can use AI to do that tracking for us in a portal. But you still are going to need that junior logistics person. And so I think it's figuring out, how do they understand the systems, and then teach them the thinking. Yeah. And so I think it's going to be more time from senior leaders to coach people on the thinking part, whereas you used to learn by doing the grunt work. A lot of that grunt work is going away. So the thing is, how do you figure, and I don't have the answer to it, but how do you figure out how to get them to understand what the grunt work is? Because, as they just said before, if AI is only 74% right, which I think is true, like you can't just blindly trust the model because AI hallucinates. You need to be able to poke through where it's making a mistake. But if a junior person never really did the data entry to understand where the mistake might be, that's sort of a little bit of a crux. So I don't think we have the answer yet. I think it's something we're talking about it all the time, and we're doing corporate AI training right now. And so we know that we're going to need less of these junior roles, but then what does that onboarding look like? I think that's going to be a journey we're all going to have to go on.
I think when I first started at Schneider, so in planning, right, there's a ton of use cases for AI and machine learning RPAs that you can roll out. And you have your standard roles, right? You have your demand planners, your supply planners. And so we were very structured at saying, okay, I have this opening, I need to backfill a demand planner. Well, through partnering with the University of Tennessee, we were able to really look and say, hey, there's this new profile coming up through our school, and it's data analyst. So we started kind of taking a risk a little bit and saying, I don't know what this person should do, or I may not have an exact job for them, but they've kind of come through the supply chain school, really, really strong in data analytics, data scientists processing our data for us. And we've taken that organization from a team of 1, hiring and saying, hey, let's figure out how to use this person, to now we have about a team of 15 or 20 people that are starting to replace some of the demand planners that we've had or the supply planners that we've had. And as they're building out and analyzing our data, looking for errors, looking at how to drive automation in our planning process, we're really bringing them along and helping them explain the various steps, because in order to build the tools for us, they need to understand the process too. So we've really tried to group it where we have kind of a new data analyst partnering and shadowing with more of an entry-level planner. And for us so far, it's been pretty successful to kind of advance AI through our supply chain.
I would say we've got a similar program with our supply chain analytics team, actually having them rotate into like a supply planner role or a demand planner role. Yeah. They can help us build better capabilities when they do the role themselves. I think too, for us, we've had to modernize our learning and development, so think about like personalized dashboards, because we have a spectrum. We have some people who are like all in and so excited about it, and we have others that are like, what is this? And so letting people learn at their own rate, I guess. But the other thing that I think we really focused on with all of this is the culture, and going from a knowing culture to a learning culture. And I think that, because again, I think the entry-level jobs, they are going to get automated and replaced, but the opportunity is so much bigger than that. And so trying to help people see we're using AI to like amplify their roles rather than just eliminate them. But you have to have this culture of learning and wanting to people be curious and seek out and experiment first. So it's been a really big focus for us.
Absolutely. Jennifer, you want to add something?
No, I think it's mainly being covered. I mean, I would say just at Schneider, like Jen was saying, we've done this in planning. We've done the same in manufacturing with pairing up, a digital native with some of our more seasoned manufacturing staff. And that's really been a successful program to start to kind of introduce the technology without losing the tribal knowledge.
Yeah.
So I think if you can strike that balance, it's a good start.
So from an SAP perspective, when customers start looking at, now I'm going to reveal something, start looking at different solutions and you launch an RFP, obviously now we have our own AI to answer those RFPs, which is both good and bad. Good because it takes a lot of our time away in administrative writing down the answers. But on the other hand, this is what everybody had to do when they first joined the company because it's the best way to learn what the customers are asking for. So now what we have them, and I think you said it, Megan, is you need to review and you need to see that the information is actually correct, that there's no hallucination or different type of answers. But then, because there is more time, they actually can use that time into focusing more in understanding the customer. So we have very good experiences, but we need to teach them how to think part. That's super. So I cannot believe that we're coming to an end. This has been very quick for me. I don't know. Last question, and I think everyone needs to answer this. I started this panel with a story. By the way, the project went well. And if you want, I can serve you coffee later. I do that. I can also talk about supply chain and others. So talking about my story, I want to hear your stories, trial and error stories. Can you share an example? We can start by you of where you tried as a leader and it worked, or maybe it didn't work, but you got a big lesson learned from that experience.
Well, maybe I can just build off of our discussion around AI and process automation. So before I was in this role, I was leading a digital transformation at Schneider. And we were really in supply chain starting to dive in hard and try and get people up with the newest technology. Especially, we were really pushing hard RPAs and like robotic process automation. And we did all of this training. Anyone who wanted to be trained could be trained. We had a couple of platforms running, not all SAP, but some SAP. And it kind of, I don't know if I do it differently, but maybe it's just a cautionary tale, is, we pushed it so hard that we started to see RPAs becoming kind of like the Excel files of the new generation. So like everybody had an RPA on their computer. If someone left, all of a sudden we didn't know how, who had programmed it, what platform it was on, what process it was running. And so it kind of got a little bit out of control for, I'd say, about a year. And we really found we had to put some guardrails in. And I guess looking back, I wish we had done that earlier, is put some guardrails around like, you use this platform, you have to have your solution validated by this, our central team, just to keep it from running a little bit too wild and crazy. So that's probably my one cautionary tale. The enthusiasm was outstanding, and we didn't want to hold that back. And so that's why I say I don't know if I'd do it differently. I think we really started to create a real, energy around automation, but I might have put those guardrails in a little sooner so that we didn't have to fight so many fires.
Everybody had their own bot.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
I can share one. We have this amazing process. It's called Run. It's how we run our operations. And it's like the near end and for the next 12 weeks. And it is beautiful. Like you log on, you see your name, and you can see what is happening from the shop floor all the way up to like our chief supply chain officer's level, right? It's incredible. It did not start that way though. So like we share it and all the other things, but like that's not how it started. And the dream really behind it was we wanted to start connecting more end to end across our whole supply chain. We wanted everybody to have access to data and to see things. And we knew we needed to solve problems more quickly and we were too siloed. And I think the lesson we learned from the start was, so we started it, and I think in a best case scenario, we still had some people using it, the process, very effectively inside their silo, so they were optimizing the heck out of their silo. They didn't really care what happened upstream or downstream. And then maybe worst case, you had some people that are like, the chief supply chain officer said we would do this, so check, I did it, right? And the lesson there that I think we learned was, we knew what could be possible, but I think, and actually Danny Kim, he's gonna be on a panel later, always says this, we fell in love with maybe the solution rather than the problem. The problem we were trying to solve was to get people out of all of these meetings, to work cross-functionally, and to move quickly, because like we just had so much happening. And we had to do a reset. And so I look at it now, and it's amazing, and it's beautiful, and I don't know how we ever ran without it before, but we didn't get it right in the beginning. And so I think that lesson is, one, making sure you really understand the problem you're trying to solve, and then like along that way, are we still solving that problem and fixing that rather than just like this solution that we think is best. Yeah.
Love it. Lisa.
You know, working in a small company, we have our fair share of issues every single day that are very unique to us. But you know, what comes to mind is a success story that came out of an issue. We really strongly integrated our supply chain bidding process into our product development process as well. And we really made sure that we're looking at all supply chain options as part of the product development process as well. So it really helped make things a little bit more smooth for all the cross-functional team members, and then also all the managers on the team that implement the projects as well when it comes down to it and executing the project. So something that we've learned along the way for sure, but it's just to always integrate and don't be afraid to speak up and, you know, have that voice for supply chain through all aspects of the business. So.
I'm gonna go the opposite direction because we're talking a lot about technology, but I think in supply chain and operations, sometimes it's like basic blocking and tackling. You gotta go be where the problem is and watch it live. Yeah. So in one of my warehouses, our operational costs were just like through the roof. We couldn't figure out why they couldn't correctly, I'm like, just ship a load accurately. Why, like, this is the list of items. Why does it not match? Why can't you validate what's going out the door? And I know you're trying your very hardest, but like, what is happening? And why do we have so many people? And why can't we get this right? So our headquarters in Vancouver, this warehouse is just outside Seattle. I'm like, I'm gonna drive there. I got in my car. I left at 5 in the morning. I spent like 13 hours on the warehouse floor, and I just watched the team work. And we have a WMS system. It's a WMS Lite that does sit on top of SAP. The way that they were doing it just like didn't make sense. So someone had like a printed piece of paper, and then they were looking at, like, someone would stack these boxes on the floor like on a staging lane in the warehouse. And he'd have like, whatever it was, one load could be 100 boxes. And the guy has this little piece of paper, and he's looking not at what box is in front of him. He's like, I've got my list of 100 items. Okay, where's this one item? Now we have to go look through all these 100 items to try and find the box. I'm like, you have a handheld. Scan the box. Get the item. So like simple things like that. And then after watching this all day, I just sort of sat there, and then it turned over to the night shift, and I said to the night shift lead, I'm like, I have an idea. Can you just like humor me and be my guinea pig? Just scan, instead of using your piece of paper, put your piece of paper over there. Take your handheld, scan your box, look at your pick list, the item's right there, check it off. You're great. Now I'm gonna go to my color coding system, put a colored sticker on it, like a green sticker. I've validated this box. Okay, great. Now go through, and all of a sudden it took from going like 30 minutes of someone validating each load with a picker standing there, watching the guy validate his work. So I'm like, not only am I having dwell time with the lead, I have an associate who's not, his pieces picked per hour is low because he's literally standing on the dock watching his manager check his work, which I'm just watching dollars go out the door. And then there's a loader who doesn't know if this thing has been validated or not, so that's why he's loading the wrong box. I'm like, okay, use your handheld, scan the box, put a sticker on it. Now the loader just needs to look for the green sticker. If he sees a green sticker, it goes in the truck. No green sticker, doesn't go in the truck. And so that was like a 13-hour journey, and all of a sudden we just figured it out. It had nothing to do with technology. It just had to do with watching the flow of people on the floor, talking to people, watching it in real life, and then figuring out an easier way. And that's where it goes to and I'm not a warehouse person. I've been doing warehousing for 2.5 years. But it's just basic, one foot in front of the other, get from point A to point B, but watch your people work. The system isn't, like, we had the system, it wasn't the system that was the problem. It was the people working within the system that was the issue, and it was change management and all those things wrapped up in one. Yeah. So yeah, I think technology, we talk a lot about technology, a lot about AI. At the end of the day, when you're in supply chain, you're in the business of making things or shipping things, getting things out the door, you still have to stay connected to the people and understand what's happening on the floor, because the system doesn't tell you that, and you're gonna miss things if you're sitting sort of in the ivory tower, which is why I also think, like, from a career perspective, like, young people need to go, like, be in the workplaces, understand how things get done, because that's how you actually solve the problems with the help of technology and all those other things.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Yeah, I think for my example, so they kind of cover technology, process, I'll maybe go deeper on the people side of things. But when we think about supply chain today, the transformations that we have, how we're constantly in pursuit of excellence, we need to make sure that we're building the best team, but building a team that's striving for continuous improvement, that kind of challenges and questions the status quo and says, how do I deploy new technology? How do I continue to advance? So for me, I think that's an area where when I take on a new team, I typically am looking and saying, okay, what's the strategy? What's the structure? Now do I have the right people in that organization? There will be times when you encounter very challenging, maybe organizational changes that you need to make because you have people with long tenure, long relationships, maybe at your company or your organization. I did encounter that in a prior position that I held, and really I had to kind of search deep and say, okay, am I really gonna shake up this organization and likely irritate quite a few people? But I kind of had to tell myself, hey, if I'm gonna fail, I'm gonna fail because I did what I thought was right, not because I didn't have the courage to make that decision. So for me, I think it's an example of constantly looking and kind of saying, you know where you're headed, you know how you wanna get there, but do you have the right people to take you there? Because if you don't have the best team possible, especially in today's environment, you're not going to be hiring those change agents, those focused on continuous improvement and organizational excellence. So for me, really on that people side.
Thank you. That reminds me of a story. It was also years back in Spain. We were working together with a beer producer, beer brewery in Madrid, very famous. And they had some problems in their warehouse, in their production plant, and they were losing amounts of batches of beer. It was costing them millions. So they had an innovation team. They spoke to us, and we went full in. IoT, machine learning, everything. We were throwing things. They were saying drones. I don't know what you can do with a drone in a plant, but let's put in the drones. We did an amazing, amazing business case. We went back. It was 10 times more the cost of implementing that than what they were losing in a monthly basis. So zero return on investment. By the way, the headline of the story is not that SAP is expensive, is that we should not do innovation just for the sake of innovation. And obviously, always looking at return on investment. Thank you very, very much for this. It was very, very interesting. I cannot let anybody leave without always thanking the NASCES team. Thank you again for letting us be here. The people in the back, thank you. Your job is amazing, and the cameramans and everybody. And to my panelists, you were amazing. The energy, this was like 5 minutes panel for me. And the audience, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying. And I think you're still stuck here, right? Because the agenda continues. Thank you. Thank you.